All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to try and untangle one of the most, chaotic periods in all of history.
I mean, how does that even happen? It's really a story about this political pendulum swinging wildly back and forth between total authority and radical liberty. It's like the entire country was just desperately searching for a stable center. Okay, let's get into it.
So before 1789, France was basically stuck in this incredibly unequal system. Think of it as the starting point, the fixed point from which this giant pendulum is about to be released. And just look at these numbers. It's wild. You've got the clergy and the nobility, right? Together, they make up less than 2% of the population, but they hold pretty much all the power. And get this, pay almost zero taxes. Meanwhile, everybody else, the so-called Third Estate, that's 98% of the people, they're shouldering the entire financial weight of the kingdom. I mean, you can see how this wasn't just unfair, it was a ticking time bomb.
And it gets worse. This wasn't some unified, smoothly run country. Oh no, it was a complete mess, a patchwork of old-school rules and just crushing taxes. I mean, just try to imagine this. You're trying to run a business, but there are over 360 different legal codes depending on which town you're in. A simple trip down a river could get you taxed dozens of times. And the salt tax, the gabelle, was hated by everyone and had 6 different rates. The whole system was basically bankrupt and just teetering on the edge of total collapse.
So, yeah, something had to give. This whole unsustainable mess finally hit its breaking point. In 1789, the kingdom is broke. The people have had enough, and that pendulum, it's finally let go. And it starts swinging, hard, towards the promise of freedom.
And once it started moving, it moved fast. In just a few months, the entire old world is just gone, swept away. A new constitutional monarchy starts to form. I mean, the speed of this change was absolutely breathtaking. For the first time in nearly 200 years, the people actually have a voice, and boy, do they use it. They start tearing down all the old symbols of power, leading up to the huge one, the storming of the Bastille, the king's infamous fortress, right in the middle of Paris.
And this right here, this single sentence, is everything. It's the whole spirit of the early revolution, all wrapped up in one idea. It promised a brand new era of equality before the law. You have to understand how radical this was. It completely tossed out that old system of the 3 estates. This wasn't just a new rule, it was a whole new way of thinking for an entire nation.
But, that incredible initial hope, it didn't last. It started to curdle into fear and paranoia. The king tries to escape, other countries are threatening to invade, and suddenly it feels like there are enemies of the revolution lurking around every corner. The pendulum was about to swing again, this time to a violent extreme.
And what was the answer to all this fear? This, the Committee of Public Safety. Basically, they created this committee to save the revolution. It was a group of 12 men who were given pretty much dictatorial power. They believed that to protect the revolution, they had to control everything. And that way of thinking, it led France straight into the reign of terror. This was essentially a wartime government with the power to arrest, try, and kill anyone they decided was an enemy of the people. And this is where it gets really fascinating, and frankly, kind of chilling. You have Maximilien Robespierre, the leader of the committee, talking about this ideal society, this republic of virtue. He truly believed that to build a perfectly free and equal society, you had to first, eliminate everyone who stood in its way. It's a terrifying logic, right? Where this supposedly noble goal is used to justify the most brutal, horrific means.
And the result of that quest for a perfect republic? This number, 16,000. That's how many people were officially executed by the guillotine during the Reign of Terror. It shows you the terrifying gap between their ideals and the reality. And get this, that number doesn't even count the tens of thousands more who died in prison or were just killed on the spot across the country. The revolution was literally eating its own children.
Okay, so after all that bloodshed, France was just exhausted. The country recoiled from that extreme, and the pendulum swung back hard towards a search for order and authority. Even Robespierre himself ended up at the guillotine, and the nation was just desperate to find some kind of middle ground. And that attempt at a middle ground was called the Directory. But honestly, it was a pretty weak and chaotic government. It was supposed to be a moderate republic, but it was just riddled with corruption and constantly under threat from both royalists on one side and the radical Jacobins on the other. It became so weak it had to rely on the army just to stay in power, which, as you can imagine, created a huge power vacuum, and a brilliant, ambitious general was waiting in the wings to fill it.
And that general was, of course, Napoleon Bonaparte. His rise was just a masterclass in consolidating power. He starts as this celebrated revolutionary general, then seizes power to become first consul, and finally crowns himself emperor. He was moving step by step from being a servant of the Republic to its absolute master. And why did people go along with it? Because he promised order, stability, and glory. And after a decade of total chaos, the French people were more than ready for that.
And this quote, it just says it all, doesn't it? This was Napoleon's entire philosophy of government. Sure, the people could give him their confidence, their trust from below, but all the real power, that came from him, from above. He built a system that looked like it had popular support, but in reality, all meaningful power was right in his hands.
But here's the thing. Not even an emperor can stop that pendulum for good. After Napoleon's final defeat in 1815, it just kept on swinging. And it looked like it was coming full circle, swinging all the way back to where this whole thing started.
So, here's the crucial point. A king did return to the throne, but France could never, ever go back to the way things were before 1789. The revolution had permanently changed the country. This new restored king, he had to accept a constitution. He had to accept that everyone was equal under the law. Feudalism was gone for good. So even with a king back in charge, the core principles of 1789 had actually survived.
But that wasn't the end of the story. Not even close. This restored monarchy, it only lasted about 15 years before, you guessed it, another revolution broke out. It just goes to show you that the pendulum hadn't found its resting place yet. The moment the new king tried to roll back some of those new freedoms, the people of Paris hit the streets all over again, and that pendulum started to swing once more.
So, the big revolution might have been over, but the search for a stable France, that had really just begun. This constant back and forth, this struggle between liberty and authority would define French politics for the next 100 years. And it leaves us with a huge question, one we still see playing out today. Where would that pendulum swing next? It's a powerful reminder that finding that perfect balance between freedom and order, well, maybe it's a journey that never truly ends.